Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm a very informal chair, and so if at any point you want to join in, stick a hand up. Just make sure that we see it. We will otherwise chat away for 55 minutes or so. The last time I interviewed Ben was for a Guardian profile, and he was doing a stage production of adaptation of L'Étranger at the Coronet Cinema, which is now a theatre. And we had, as always with Ben, he never just talks about the work he's working on. It's always, it ranges way beyond it. And we had a fascinating conversation about the problems of staging a play when the Arab was silent. Now, I'm mentioning this might sound, you all will know the story of L'Étranger, Meursault, the French Algerian who's murdered this silent character. And when I was reading this book, you will see the relevance of this. I will get to the relevance of this anecdote. It struck me that the image of somebody who is silent, the voice that is silenced, and the historical baggage that carries is sort of a massive part of the problem that we are facing now. And all the way through this book, which is Ben's latest book, published last year, Tigerwork, it's about people who didn't speak or couldn't speak, and who left it too late or were silenced. And towards the end of the book, I don't know how many of you have read it. How many of you read it? A lot? Oh, we've got a cluster around here. He talks about existential creativity, the importance and value of existential creativity. Hence my thoughts immediately going back to L'Étranger and this silenced voice. Ben, I wonder if you could just start with that, where that takes you.
Where the Camus takes me, or
where the idea of where existentialism brings you, where that.
Well, that's very interesting. You should, because the minute I saw you, I remembered L'Étranger. It just all came back. And the strange thing is, I'm rereading Camus at the moment. Rereading for maybe the 20th time the myth of Sisyphus, with its very strange opening, where he says maybe the most important question. Maybe the most fundamental question of all is whether you should commit suicide or not. And he was a young man when he wrote this, under the sentence of death because he had tuberculosis. So he was dealing with death every day. I'd been dealing with it for some time. And the room where he was staying in a hotel in Paris, someone upstairs, a young lady upstairs, had just committed suicide, and someone downstairs had also done the same. So this question, to be or not to be, became a big question for him, and it's a key question that runs through the essays and the works. I mean, his answer is, don't. You must live. But he argues it very, very powerfully through literature, art, seduction. Looks at this problem of the absurd and of being. Now, I'm going at length on about this because of the way in which I think it is still the central question of our times, except that it has taken a new form. This to be or not to be, this to live or not to live, is now the central question of the climate crisis. Because a large part of what constitutes the climate crisis is the indirect suicide of the human race. We're doing this to ourselves. Nobody's doing this to us. We're the ones pumping stuff into the atmosphere with our various gadgets and our various ways of living, which we've perfected over the last 150 years. We're the ones treating the soil in such a way that it becomes depleted. We're the ones destroying our rivers in such a way that to think of swimming is to think of something horrendous. We're doing this to ourselves. So there's a story, one of the stories in Tiger Work, where I say, I say that it is a kind of indirect suicide that the human race is committing on itself, either consciously or unconsciously. Unconsciously in the sense that those who don't want to know about it and those who think that actually it's not true and it's not a real problem, and those who know about it, they're conscious of it, but feel powerless and don't do anything. Meanwhile, the problem gets worse each year. The news stories terrify us. It gets bigger and bigger. This sense of an apocalypse is drawing nearer and nearer, and we just carry on as if nothing dramatic and existential were befalling us. Mm-hmm. So that Camus question is gone from being a personal question to being a question of the human race.
Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about this idea of existential creativity, which is a sort of manifesto that you have at the very end of the book.
Well, I mean, I came to this. I must be honest and say I came to environmental activism, such as I partake of it. I came to it rather late, but it's been there. When I look back, it's been there in my work from the very beginning. Everything I've written about Nigeria keeps touching upon the things that we're doing to the land, things we're doing to the air, the things we're doing to our food. The gases that we burn in the air. You grow up in Lagos and you're breathing in oxygen and methane just because of the gases being, and you breathe this funny thing in and it makes you a bit woozy and you don't quite know what it is. You think it's just stuff coming from the cars but it's not. It's all of the hydrocarbons, all the oil waste that we've burned about 2 billion pounds worth of oil waste in the last 50 years. Just constant burning throughout the country. So it's been there, but I've not been aware of it in a very conscious way. So I came to it about relatively late, about 7, 8, 9 years ago. I've been avoiding it like most writers. We concentrate on style and we concentrate on the work and the strength of the book and plot and if some of us have a social conscience, we extend our writing to include that, but in a careful sort of way because we're suspicious of the effect of politics on the purity of the art. But my daughter was born about 7 years ago, and when she was 3 years old, she'd wander along the canal, raking out plastic from the water with a stick. As we go along, she kept pulling it out, and I'd watch her and I'd think, why is she doing this when I should have been doing this most of my life? And it took a new generation. It took concern about the future of one's children in a very personal, very direct sort of way. And the more I faced the fact, the more I looked at it, the more I felt that I couldn't avoid it anymore. And therefore it had to become a central part of my writing. It had to be a central part of how I dealt with the world in some way. So now I work on climate issues in my fiction, in art, with my collaborator Rosemary Clooney, with my friend Charlotte Jarvis in dance. I try to use all the different media that I can to draw attention to it in as seductive and as angry and as persuasive a way as I can find.
You also say that you feel that it's the duty of a writer to be as simple and as direct as possible in addressing this.
Well, I came at this very logically. If we are on the brink of some unspeakable thing as a result of what we've been talking about, if it is true that something is hanging over us to do with the environment, if this is true, then as a writer, you have a choice. what do you do with words? What do you do with language? Faced with this existential condition. I think faced with an existential condition, for me, I've spoken to some other writers, they feel differently about it. For me, suddenly your sense of your art becomes clearer, purer, simpler. You cut out the bullshit. You cut out what Hemingway calls a scrollwork. Which is not to say you can't be rich or lyrical, but it just means that the art becomes truer, not more naked, but more authentic, more because there isn't time to piss around, really, and there isn't time to confuse people with elaborate footwork. You know, if someone's house is burning and you can see it and you can send them a text, are you going to send them a Joycean sentence? Are you going to send them a long Proustian sentence? I don't think so. I think you'll say, man, get the hell out of there, your house is burning. But if you're a writer, you say it a bit more beautifully than that. But you say the same thing. Get out of there, house burning. I think that's where we are. But then some poets felt this already about 50, 60 years ago, that we needed to get rid of the too much gold that weighs down our art. I don't think the gold should weigh down the art. I think the gold should be inside the heart of the art.
So who is your readership? Because you're one of these rare writers who've totally broken out. You were the person who wrote about Grenfell Tower. You were the person who wrote a sort of a paean to Jeremy Corbyn when that Corbyn moment happened.
And many other things. I wrote about Ukraine when that happened, and I don't know. I come from a tradition in Africa where the writer has a kind of a public responsibility to address the awkward and difficult things. We can't leave these things to the politicians. We really can't. And if you have some kind of a public voice and a keen sense of responsibility, I think it's useful and helpful as a writer to try and clarify your understanding of the key issues of your times, and to cry out when a cry is called for, and to scream when a scream is called for. If that will wake people up to the urgency of the situation, I think it's part of our responsibility. I don't think it's the only one, but I think it's a part, and it's a matter of choice. Again, some writers choose it, and others, many don't.
Now, I'm interested in you saying that you came to this only 6 or 7 years ago, because
in an intense way.
In an intense way, but the way that your storytelling has developed, it seems to me that those processes have been happening over a far longer period. You've been refining down, cutting away all the excess, writing in a shorter, more direct style.
Well, maybe I felt the urgency before I consciously addressed myself to it. You know, sometimes you can feel the heat in the room before you start to sweat. You can just feel it. Your socks start to feel it. Your hand starts to feel it. Your soul feels it. I think many sensitive writers feel things before they've consciously grasped them. I think that's the beauty of the sensitivity of the artist, really. The trick is to give yourself over to it, even when you don't know why you're doing it. Some things we arrive at through kind of ratiocination, through thought, through the manifesto was arrived at through logical thought. But before I got there, I'd already been feeling that something was wrong about the relationship between the language we use and the world in which we find ourselves. I've been concerned about that for a while.
And another thing that you have talked about in the past is about, and this speaks to my thing about the voice, the silenced voice. You talked about the African mood and refinding that. I think you described it as that great oceanic tide of African fables and stories, what you call the vast invisible literature.
Yeah. I know, I've always felt there's two kinds of literatures. There's the visible and the invisible. And we only pay attention to the visible ones, but the invisible literature, I think, the invisible literatures are the greater ones, because they're the substratum. They're the ones that hold up what becomes visible. Ezra Pound said somewhere that poetry dies when it moves too far from song. I know exactly what he means. I think the novel is the same thing. When the novel moves too far from fable, or too far from those ancient stories, something happens to the novel. It becomes too cerebral. I think those invisible literatures inform all the new great stages of the leaping out of the literary form. So I'm thinking of what's happening now amongst African writers. It's because of this sense of a return. I've just been editing an anthology of African short stories. And this is what strikes me. The fertile dialogue between the contemporary world and the slowly disappearing ancient world. It's quite heartbreaking. But this invisible literature that we're losing, that is not only invisible now, it's just dying away. Because we don't know how to give it life. And what we're doing right now, we're doing the same thing with nature. The silence you talk about, for us, nature is becoming increasingly more silent. We've forgotten how to give nature a voice. We've forgotten how to let nature speak. In all the old tales, folk tales, nature speaks, trees speak, animals speak, spirits speak, the earth speaks. We've lost that. And I think because we've lost that speech of nature, we've become divorced from her. We've become separated from her. We now think of nature as being over there, something we go to as we go to a park or to a forest. We talk of going to nature, when in fact there should always be an interpenetration between us and nature, because we are nature too. We're not trans nature. We're not above nature. We are nature. I don't know how consciousness has made us see ourselves separate from that vast, silent world, that vast, silent, rich, supportive, sustaining world that nature is, that we are slowly destroying.
I wondered whether you might read a little bit. One of the bits that I particularly loved, which absolutely speaks to this, and it's love. From the beginning, page 8. And it absolutely speaks to a direct conversation with nature, or the result of what happens if you don't have that conversation.
Well, this is from Tiger Work, and at the beginning I have something called 3 parables about water, and the third parable is, as Claire said, is called love. When I was a kid, I used to talk to the river in my hometown. "How are you?" I once asked. "Not so good," the river said. "Why not?" "There was a time," the river said, "when your people used to worship me as a goddess. Back then, my water was clean and pure, and children loved playing in me, and beautiful young girls came to fetch water. The town used to celebrate and make songs about me every year. I was quite a river back then." "What happened?" I asked. "You're really tiny now." "Well," the river said, "the factories came and began dumping things in me. I grew sluggish, and the mermaids didn't come anymore to play on my shores. The town stopped making songs about me. Then they forgot about me altogether." "I haven't," I said. "You're still my friend. That's why I'm still here. But I'm moving away. I only delayed going because I was waiting for you to grow up." "Where are you going?" "Does it matter? When you've been a goddess, you don't want to be a puddle, which is what I now am. But I'll miss you. When you think of your childhood in this forgetful town, you will at least always remember me as a real river. I want to leave when that memory is still fresh in one person's mind. I'm really sorry to hear it, I said. Tell me where you're going so I can come and visit you. I'm going to be free. If something is there, your people take it for granted. They respect things that are not there anymore. They make religions out of them. When your people take something for granted, they do terrible things. Like what? They empty their sewers into it. This they call appreciation. It's better for your people if things are no longer here. Is that why you're leaving? Because you're not properly honored? If that's the case, things only stay because they're loved, the river said. I can't bear indifference. It's the cause of all I've suffered, all the toxic waste dumped in me. No one hates me, it's just that they don't care. The river was silent for a while. This is the last time you'll see me. Our fates are linked. When I'm gone, you'll never return to this town. Why is that? One day your mother and father will pass away. Then what will be left? Just the sense that no one cares about you. I'm the only one that could cradle you as I did when you were a child. When I disappear, this town will die. I never heard the voice of the river again. I grew up and traveled into the world. The last time I was back, the river had gone. The town had shrunk. I still seek that river everywhere I go. The peculiar thing was I wrote this about my hometown in Nigeria. And it's happening here now. I travel around England, and everywhere I go, people complain and talk about the stuff that's happening to the rivers, the toxic waste that's poured into it, the sewers that's emptied into it, the way the water corporations are disrespecting the great, beautiful rivers of this country. It's one of the things I'm most upset about right now. I really, when I go to towns with rivers, I say, you guys should be staging a revolution. You really should. You should. Your politicians are not going to listen anymore. There's an election going on. None of the politicians have mentioned, that I've heard of, the issue of what's happening to the waters, the rivers of this country. You cannot contract certain illnesses from drinking tap water.
And that is a recurrent theme in this collection, actually, that illness, waterborne illness.
Yeah. Do you not feel what I'm talking about?
Yes.
It seems to me that in that there are many different forms of oratory in this collection, as there always are in Ben's work. But in that particular one, it feels like it's the spirit of Ted Hughes and the Iron Man that you're taking forward. Do you not know that?
No, I don't know it. No, wow.
And what's interesting about it was he was doing these great eco-fables, and then we sort of forgot about them. And so every generation has to reinvent them, and here you are reinventing the eco-fable for grown-ups, we hope.
Well, is one reinventing, or is one discovering what should have been part of our tradition all along? Maybe if we had more of those, we would be more conscious of what we're doing. I don't know. I sometimes worry about us storytellers, I sometimes wonder if we're not too seduced by the fashions of our times and forget the really basic things that the heart needs in stories. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Say more.
Well, I met someone the other day, said they're writing a novel. I said, so what are you writing? It says writing a thriller. Wonderful. I met somebody else. What are you writing? I'm writing a thriller. I'm like, is everybody writing thrillers? Thrillers are great, but we also need stories about the sanity we require. We need stories about our earth. Stories about water. We need more water stories.
Yesterday I was at a festival and I interviewed Paul Lynch, who was last year's Booker winner, whose novel Prophet's Song, I don't know whether any of you've read it, seems to me a partner. That is the novelistic novel partner to this collection. It also addresses, it goes absolutely to the heart of, cuts away all the fat and goes absolutely straight to the heart of a slightly different aspect of this, which is totalitarianism and irresponsible government and the powerlessness of ordinary people.
Yeah, I wonder about that phrase, the powerlessness of ordinary people.
Go on, say more about that.
I don't know, I think it's a fiction. I don't know. I think it's a fiction and a seduction that a lot of us have somehow unconsciously taken on. You talk to people, a lot of people, they feel what we feel about water, about the environment, and then they say, "But there's nothing I can do. It's bigger than me. It's too big. Government should be doing something." And I always think, "But you're the government. It's you that the government rests on. If you throw your voice, and your neighbor throws their voice, and we all throw our voices, that would be quite a sound heard throughout the land." And we forget that. We forget to infect our neighbors with our passion for truth. We forget that when we act, people are inspired by us. So I don't believe in the powerlessness. I believe in the. I think what has happened is we've bought into it, but we're not. People are not powerless. We constitute what power is. We forget that we make power, and then we give our power. I could make a fable about this. I really could. We give our power to the nearest politician, the politician that we feel closest to. We give it to them, or to the king, or to some other authority figure. And then we sit back, and then they use our power for us. And if they collect enough of that power, they look really, really powerful, and we look really, really powerless. But it's we who gave them the power. We should behave like the tortoise. We should behave like the birds in that African tortoise story, where the tortoise went to heaven because he was able to borrow all the feathers of all the birds and flew with them. And when he got to heaven, he behaved atrociously, and all the birds came and they took their feathers back. They came and they said, "You're a bastard." And each one came and took their feather back, and poor tortoise couldn't fly back to earth because everyone had taken their feathers back. And that's what we should do. From time to time, we should take our feathers back.
And by taking, so how do you imagine this happening? Is this through collective, is this through political action, or is this through individual conscience? How does this work?
A combination of all of the above. Absolutely. Individual conscience, sharing it with your neighbors, sharing it with the groups that you belong to, political action, activism, protests, whatever. I think when times get difficult, we should move from being passive citizens to being active citizens. And then when times are really, really bad, we should move from being active citizens to being, angry citizens. And then when times are bloody awful,
what do you think of this big thing that you're probably all aware of, about fossil-free books, sort of rounding on a sponsor of literary festivals, and have been very, very effective. In a very short space of time, they have caused the withdrawal of a lot of money from a lot of festivals, which support a lot of writers like you.
I know it's difficult, isn't it? We need festivals. Festivals are, they're more than just places for writers to sell their books. For me, festivals are, the modern equivalent of the old civic, the old civic idea that you had in ancient Greece, the old polis. The place where people come together to share ideas, to catch what the mood of the times are. That's expressed through the thinkers and the philosophers and people catch a fire and they share a fire and then they go back home and they read and they think and then they vote differently and they act differently. Festivals were one of the places for that, and that's why they became very popular. They were also one of the places to get us out of our lonelinesses and restore some sort of sense of a community, some sort of a sense of a coming together. So festivals they're vital. The reason why they got challenged is because they were sponsored by people that many of the activists felt had too much of an investment, too much of a hand in things that are increasingly paralyzing the planet. So, literature at its heart has to deal with the issue of authenticity. It really has to, sooner or later. Because otherwise it becomes a case where it's easy to write something down but not to live it. And this gap between what you say on a page, what you write on a page, that people read, take into their lives, and how you live, if there's too much of a gap between what you write and how you live, it becomes problematic. And literature has to work from a place of authenticity. So it's understandable how, people who felt that the festivals couldn't be sponsored by fossil fuel investors, how that caught fire. It just, that was the place it was going to do that.
But it caught fire because of the title and the slogan. It didn't necessarily catch fire because of what that particular sponsor was doing, because the sponsor has mounted quite a strong defence,
It's not that strong a defence. They say their defence is that they only invest 2% of their holdings in fossil fuels and stuff like that. But 2%, when you're managing investment that's about 20 billion or 200 billion or whatever it is, 2% is a lot of money. It's a lot of investment. So the 2% is a trick. It's saying, well, it's really, really mine. It's only 2%. It's like saying, I only killed 2% of the population. It's not that many people, only 2%. But if the population is about 100 million, that's a lot of people. So they didn't mount that good a defense. I was much more persuaded by the fact that they say yes, they're beginning to invest more in environmentally friendly activities. That's more persuasive. But the 2% was pretty lame. We didn't buy it. People didn't buy it. They just did the figures. They just did the maths.
Were you approached by them?
By who?
By the fossil fuel books to do anything?
Yes, I was part of the Edinburgh Festival. Was it last year? Was it 2 years ago? I had to pull out because
Because of that?
I couldn't square the two things. I didn't make a noise about it because I didn't want to harm the festival. But I just sent in a note saying I can't, conscience take part, and I just pulled out. Mm-hmm. I want festivals to exist. I don't want to harm the idea. I don't want to destroy the idea of festivals. But we've got to find some other way of getting our money. We just have to, or persuade.
May I join this conversation? I'm a writer myself. I was at Hay. I've written a book about nonviolent direct action. I can give you the title later if you want it. But there's a whole chapter on non-cooperation, starting with Desmond Tutu's call that if the climate crisis would adapt the anti-apartheid tactics, they would win. So I was astounded, as I also quoted Greta and Michaela Loach from last year, that Hay invited me. And long before Fossil Fuels wrote to me, I ignored their letter. I have signed it, but I didn't. They asked for sort of coordinated action, but I had already planned, I'm a member of Health for Extinction Rebellion, an action with my 2 colleagues that we would quietly, non-disruptively use the festival to communicate a message not about the festival, but directly to Baillie Gifford, saying, please divest. Because 2%, thank you, Ben, thank you, 2% is billions. I work as an aid worker in the Amazon and in Guatemala. Indigenous people, your story on water breaks my heart. They are suffering that now, and this 2% is going into drilling in the Amazon, destroying these environments. And when I read all these letters, forgive me, in the Guardian and Observer, these long opinion pieces saying, oh, it's just 2%. I want to say that 2% is many, many lives. Today, my colleagues are in court, having broken the windows at JP Morgan. You covered it again in The Guardian, because people are dying in their millions of starvation. This is so serious. I am so grateful for you, one, for the opinion you've given on this today, and for your writing and for what you're doing. And can I ask us to have more debate about the Baillie Gifford issue? And can someone, me if you like, take up this or get Ben, write what you've just said.
You sound like a good candidate. Grab that wonderful lady.
But this, I just wanted to take this moment that you opened, Claire and Ben, to say, please, festivals are wonderful, but if festivals are killing people, we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge it. As a doctor, if I told you had a 2% risk of cancer, you would be worried. You would be doing something about it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
At 2%.
Yeah, very good point.
Sorry for
Thank you
that.
very much.
No,
Thank
good
you.
point.
Thank
Very
you.
good point. Thank you. Do you want to talk to that?
How can you? It's perfect.
So I'm sure we will go on. Oh, do you got something? Yes.
Just in response to that, I suppose, I mean, it's interesting here with all of us of a particular age and probably a particular class. Yeah, sure. I mean, the reason I was clapping at the comment about people was actually that it's people, it's kind of our neighbours, it's the populace that is voting against what everyone in this room believes right now. And they are not being addressed, actually. So the people that are supporting Trump, the left behind, you know, Trump is probably going to get into power in the United States. And I do feel a little bit like I'm in a very kind of elite little circle here, which is lovely to talk about these things. And I've been an environmentalist since I was very young. I'm an academic, so I'm an empiricist and use data in everything I do. But I do feel that we're kind of ignoring one of the big issues here, and that is that it's our neighbours in lots of other places that we live that actually are voting against all of these things. European Union has just voted, you know, against, you know, cutting back environmental issues. So I kind of think one thing I would just say to Ben is that talking to young writers, encouraging young writers to take up the mantle now is the important thing. Waiting until we become middle-aged and we really care about these things is a bit too late. That's who I think we've got to do it.
Yeah, but you see, but the trouble with that, it's you're absolutely right. The trouble with that is that you can't actually persuade a writer to take on a mantle of anything. You really can't. You can't get them down and say, listen, chaps and ladies, look, you really ought to take this climate business rather seriously. It's going to affect your future, you know. And they won't listen. You can't talk to them because the thing about being a writer, and especially a young writer, is your freedom.
Well, there's no point talking to us because we're already on the side.
There's no. That's another mistake. There is point talking to us because we too need our spirit strengthened. It's very easy for us to say, well, we're on side, but you know, Trump's over there, and then you get depressed, and then you don't do anything. We too need to be strengthened. That's what the Baptist Church called always bringing a hallelujah back to the people. You need to fire up the spirit of the people. Trump's firing up his base. Why shouldn't I fire up my base? You have to fire up your base. You never say, people always say you're talking to the converted. Hello, sometimes the converted need to be powered up so that they can go convert some more. So let's.
And also, I think there are a lot of people who think of themselves as converted with one half of their brain, but they don't actually act on it with the other half of their brain, because internalized, this whole internalized thing of, oh, we don't have any power, which can be quite willful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful point.
So I want to just bring it back quickly to the book and to a couple of the things that keep recurring in it. One of which is people living underground. A lot of your people live underground.
Yeah.
So what's that about?
Well, when overground is getting toxic, where are you going to go? One, two. A lot of the underground people in the stories have been. That's where they've been driven. There's a story about houses, people going slowly under, deeper under. That's where they've been driven. That's my form of a Kafka fable. Sinking cities, sinking lives, where slowly going underground. And we carry on as if we're still overground, but it's the pressure of the times where, sometimes you have an image, and you don't want to overthink it. You just feel it to be right. And then you open a newspaper one day and then you read about cities that are sinking. They're sinking at the rate of about 1% a year. London is sinking. Lagos is a sinking city. So,
yeah, it's sort of powerful and mysterious.
I don't want to overthink it. It's just something that I just instinctively feel is happening.
Yeah.
The earth isn't as solid as it used to be, because we've done stuff to it, and it's just slowly yielding. It's like building our civilizations on quicksand.
And the other thing is, which speaks to your point about young people, is it's full of children. There's hope if there is hope in the children.
Yeah, it's her fault.
She's got her nose in a book, which is a good way to be.
It's her fault. I've always written about children. The family story is about a child. I've always had I've always been interested in looking for the places in society where things are most felt, and where the suffering will be most exploded, and where also the hope can most come from. It's paradoxical. And in this one, it's full of children's voices. Because we've loaded onto the children our irresponsibility of centuries, and now they're the ones taking up the mantle, to our shame.
So is the situation that while they are children, they're in this state of innocence and wisdom, a sort of wisdom, but they will grow up to be like us? Or is it that this is a new generation who will be better than us?
Well, this is a new generation that's certainly seeing farther than we are seeing. We're more responsible than we've been. When you watch your own kids sort of going along the canal, plucking out plastic bags from it, and you think, I wouldn't do that. And then you think, why am I not doing that? What happened to me? Well, I thought that's not my business. That's the job of the council. Why are we leaving everything to the council when we can do something?
Which are going bust anyway.
Which are going bust anyway. Yeah.
You have another reading that.
I do. Do we have time?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I do. This is collected from This is just collected from different parts of this book. So I've just brought it's a little anthology from the book. I came out in a hurry, so I couldn't print it. So I'm going to read it from my phone, if I can find it. What can one say to people who either don't want to hear or have heard enough. What can one say that does not paralyze with the sheer scale of the problem? This earth that we love is in grave danger because of us. We have raped, exploited, abused, destroyed, wrecked, and disemboweled her. We blow her up, we blast her apart, we smash her, we detonate atomic bombs on her, we poison her. They say the earth now has only 50 years of topsoil left. They say we have less than 2 decades of fishes in the sea. Can you hear the future weeping? In the past, we have used fear. We have thrown at people facts, numbers, temperatures, loss of species, and still we drive our fossil fuel cars and make flights around the world and consume vast quantities of electricity. It seems to be asking too much for people to alter how they live so that life on this planet can survive. Nobody wants to turn back the clock. No one wants to regress. Fear doesn't work. Guilt doesn't work either. So I thought maybe love might work. Maybe if we all did something modest, if we all did something modest, then change can be achieved. Maybe it's not about going back. Maybe it's a going forward, living in harmony with ourselves and the world. Maybe living simply is the evolutionary thing. Perhaps we've grown too complicated for our own good. We want more than we need. I think love is the highest economy of life. It is the most efficient force for civilization. If we woke up to our love for the earth, we would stop doing most of the things we're doing. In the Tao Te Ching, there's an extraordinary passage where it says that the sage loves the world as they love their body. If the earth were our body, would we do half the things to it that we're doing? Nothing else can save our world but our love. For love is the last power that stands between us and extinction. When we act with love, we act with all the powers in the human spirit. No other quality comes close to bringing out the genius of the human. Toughness will fail. Will exhausts itself in the end. Only love is cosmic. Only love is endless. What we need now in this 11th hour is the greatness of the human. This is the time we need to show that we are greater than our history, greater than our education, greater than all the brainwashing that makes us think that we can't be agents of change. The greatness we need to reach for is love. There's no real greatness without it. When we love, we know the right thing to do. I'm not here to predict this action or that. Do you love this world? Do you love this earth? Then all you have to do is listen to your love. Don't do to the earth what you won't do to your body. Let's turn the fierce force of our love to saving life on this planet. Let's start now in whatever way we can. The most powerful thing about love is its capacity to inspire change. The great German poet Rainer Maria Rilke said famously, in German, of course, we must change our lives. We must change our atmosphere. We must breathe good, clean air again and eat food that tastes as if all the earth's nourishment has gone into it. We're in the last days of our history as we know it. We can't go back and we can't go forward anymore as we are. We have to become a new species. We have to achieve that rare thing, a quantum development in our possibilities. We need to leap now to the next stage of the human. Without this leap, there is no future. In that sense, we are at a terminal point. It is either death or transformation. It is either extinction or we become a newer, more efficient species. Nothing ordinary can achieve that. Only love can do it. Our love must save the world.
Thank you, Ben.